So welcome everybody to Grow Smarter with HubSpot and AI. This is part of our monthly webinar series. So we do one or two a month, and we basically just bring in industry leaders. And our whole focus is just try and make this stuff understandable. Try and make it so you can apply it to what you're doing. So real quick, I'm Paul Roetzer. If you're not familiar with me, I'm the founder and CEO of Marketing AI Institute, which is an education and event company focused on making AI approachable and actionable. And I also own PR 2020, which is a 15-year-old marketing agency, and we were HubSpot's first partner. So I know some people on this call are part of the HubSpot ecosystem. There's thousands of agencies around the world that are partners, and they've built their businesses around HubSpot and offering services on top of HubSpot software. So we were the origin of that program way back in 2007. And so we've been working with HubSpot for all these years, I guess 13 years now. And Kevin and I have gotten to know each other through the years and had lots of conversations sitting around talking about AI. So I will introduce Kevin. Real quick, you had done a expert spotlight for us, Kevin. I thought this was a good explanation rather than a boring bio. So what's his role? So he said he's responsible for HubSpot's AI products and programs in partnership with the senior engineering manager of AI, lead a group of cross-functional product teams to deliver AI products and processes to HubSpot's commercial product lines, as well as internal systems. So in terms of what Kevin does, I'll let you kind of add anything to that, Kevin, before we get started. But basically, he's the guy for probably 3-4 years now, Kev, that you've been really focused on the development of the products at HubSpot and then the integration of them into the communications and the marketing and everything else that's going on.
Yep, that's exactly right. I was the first product manager at HubSpot to be working on what we called the machine learning team at the time. We've morphed into artificial intelligence, and I think we'll talk a little bit about that later and why. But yeah, it's been a real journey. It's been super exciting to see the team grow and to continue to launch these projects. Most of what we're going to talk about today is our customer-facing external commercial products, but we also do have a huge catalog of things that helps HubSpot behind the scenes and helps our customer experience behind the scenes. And thrilled to be back chatting with you, Paul.
So Kevin did prepare some slides to talk about specific features of AI features within HubSpot, but we're going to kind of have this be a little bit more informal. We're going to leave tons of time for questions. I'm going to give 2 minutes on the Institute in case you're not familiar, and then just kind of lead off with a couple of questions for Kevin, just about his positioning on AI, his thoughts on it, and how HubSpot thinks about it. And then he's going to walk us through some of the features that like he was saying, are readily available to customers now. And then we'll just kind of have more of an informal conversation and take your questions. So like I said, I have a couple of quick questions to get us started that I think level set on kind of where Kevin and HubSpot come at AI from. That'll help you then better understand the kind of tools that they built. So Kevin, again, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
How do you define AI? This is always like, I get this question all the time when I go do talks. What is AI to you and to HubSpot?
Yeah, it's a little squishy. My favorite go-to one-liner explanation is AI is a broad category of technologies that are trying to mimic human thought or decision-making in particular. One level deeper than that, whenever you see AI referenced in like product marketing materials, that usually means that that's using a specific technology called machine learning. And machine learning is basically statistics. I think when people hear machine learning, it sounds really fancy, but at the end of the day, it is just math, and it's trying to help again, mimic that complicated decision-making process that a human takes to make some decision about, how do I figure out what's in this image? What am I looking at? Or how do I figure out what this support case is about? Or how do I figure out what this blog post is about? Or how do I recommend the next best blog post to tell somebody? All of that can be done through statistical modeling. And that's mostly what we talk about when we're thinking about AI in the marketing space.
Yeah, you and I have talked about this before. The thing I love about machine learning, as abstract as it sounds, it's one of the most literal definitions or literal words you can have, because it literally means the machine learns and improves. So like you're saying, it's like making predictions about outcomes or behaviors based on historical data, but it keeps getting smarter. And so we'll actually talk about a couple of examples where HubSpot's using machine learning to where the solutions keep getting better as more data is input into the system. All right, so how about HubSpot's overall point of view? This is something you and I have spent a lot of time talking about through the years, but when you're thinking about the application of AI, the building of it into the platform, how do you guys generally think about AI and the value it can create for customers?
Yeah, these days, and I'll go through a lot of examples later in this presentation, but we've really been focused on enabling marketers to have outcomes based on high quality data. And so a lot of that is through automating sort of mundane routine tasks to ensure that the data that's in your CRM is usable to do things like personalization or like high quality reporting that you can trust or segmentation for your lists. All of that typically requires scrubbing the data that's in your CRM, which is a really mundane task that people tend to not want to do. And as a result, it falls by the wayside. So our approach to AI these days is really a sophisticated automation for tasks to enable marketers to do higher value things like build high quality lists, recommend relevant content, and things like that that are closer to the core, valuable, more creative thinking that marketers need to do.
Yeah, I know one of the things you and I have talked about through the years is this idea of you can hit the home runs, like you can go for these massive industry changing solutions with AI. And we're not saying those won't exist, but the fundamental thing and the valuable approach HubSpot's taken is hit a bunch of singles and doubles, like just these really tangible, valuable tasks that makes the marketer's job incrementally more efficient and makes them incrementally better at what they do while working behind the scenes on some of these maybe bigger opportunities that could emerge.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of really subtle things that are happening that you may notice when you look closely, but it's kind of happening silently in the background to make sure nothing falls through the cracks and make sure that your, marketing, sales, and customer service flywheel are really spinning as quickly as possible.
I think I've even heard Dharmesh say like it should be seamless, that AI should be a seamless element of marketing software. You shouldn't have to say it's AI. It should just be better.
Yeah, we've always kind of thought that way at HubSpot, that we're not an AI first company. We are a marketing, sales, and customer service first company, and we're trying to help people grow their businesses better. But we're also a modern technology company. So of course we're using AI, of course we're using distributed computing, of course we're using cloud technology. All of those things are really table stakes, but we are like laser focused on our core mission of helping marketers and sales reps and customer service folks grow their businesses better. And that needs to continue to be the goal, not the technology that we use to reach that.
Yeah, and that actually leads well into my last question before we turn over to you and let you kind of walk through. How do you guys structure the team at HubSpot? I know this has been a moving target over the years, that it's been evolving as more machine learning engineers have been brought in and more features and elements of the product. So talk to us a little bit about how you guys think about the structure of the team.
Yep. So the team is basically a central data science organization that sits within HubSpot's larger product and engineering team. And there are two halves of it. The first half, we act as an in-house consultancy for other product groups, and HubSpot's larger product organization is structured around sort of like our large applications. So for example, we have like a CRM group that owns the CRM. We have an automation group that owns all of our workflows tools. We have a content group that owns the CMS, et cetera. And so if any of those teams want to do a AI project, they will work with us, and we supply sort of the data science engineering power to help enable some machine learning project that fits more closely in their product context. For example, a project that we recently did was in collaboration with the content product group to help people migrate externally hosted blogs, be that on WordPress or Blogspot or some of the other open source blogs platforms, to HubSpot. We have a process that helps to try to identify which pages on your blog are actually blog posts, or which are listing posts, or which are author biographies. And really subtle improvements to help automate what was a manual process of folks having to identify blog posts has helped people get started on HubSpot much more quickly. So the first half of that is that kind of consultancy model where we're working mostly with our internal teams to help them launch machine learning projects. And the other half of that is we act as a one-stop shop, end-to-end product team where we own the entire product process from research and design all the way until deployment to our customers. And so some of the products that we've had that fall into that camp are like our CRM deduplication tool, which is a full standalone one-page app to help people identify contacts and companies in their database that are likely to be duplicates, and a few others. We're also going to touch on the email signature parser, which we launched as part of the Sales Hub Enterprise relaunch at Inbound just a few months ago. So overall, there's, like I said, the two halves of it. Within the group, we have engineers and we have data scientists, designers, and product managers. And we work with other teams at HubSpot, and we also build entire products ourselves.
I know, like, we get this question from big enterprises a lot who are starting to think about how to integrate AI into their marketing and sales and service within the organization. And so the question becomes, like, do we have an AI person who oversees marketing, an AI person who oversees sales? Are they discipline specific? Or is it like you guys almost have in the product where it's almost this layer over and you're overseeing where are the best use cases for it across all disciplines within the organization? So it's so early right now. I haven't seen a great model yet of how this is going to play out. I think a lot of companies are trying to figure out how to structure AI into their actual organizational structure.
Yeah, it's a debate. I mean, it's even been a debate at HubSpot over the years because HubSpot's been around for 14 years and the AI group has been here for, 4 or 5. There's a lot of literature about this. Different companies do it different way. Usually it's a question of where does the data science group sit? Sometimes it's a standalone function. Sometimes it rolls up into engineering. Sometimes it rolls up into some kind of BI function, or sometimes it is a more distributed model where the marketing ops team, the sales ops team, and the product ops team all hire independent data scientists and they function in more of a guild. There's pros and cons to all of those things. And if anybody's trying to figure out the best way to introduce a data science function into their organization, definitely do some research, reach out to any of your peers that have done similar things, because it's definitely murky, but it is an important thing to consider as you're growing an organization.
And I did have one more, and we actually kind of touched on this one a little bit. And I think you can maybe go more through this question as you're kind of walking through your features. So I'll turn it back over to you if you want to take the screen control and walk us through. We got about 10 slides or so that talk about the different features here.
Sure. So thanks again, Paul, for the intro there. Folks, again, my name is Kevin Walsh. I'm the Group Product Manager for AI at HubSpot. And today I want to give a quick tour of some of the live features and products that we have that leverage machine learning today. So the first thing that we're going to talk through is some of the themes about how we think about applying AI to HubSpot's products. There's a long catalog of things, but I think grouping them into themes can help sort of recognize where can AI be valuable. The largest one for us is really this idea that AI can help keep data clean or data hygiene. And I have a list of some of the smaller use cases within this larger theme of data hygiene here related to contact deduplication, CRM import mapping, and business card scanner, about taking data from one place, getting it into the HubSpot CRM and making sure that things are being transferred correctly. And then a couple other things like sales call transcription. More and more, we see sales folks on the phone chatting, and the important content that's relevant for marketers is actually happening in that conversation. So you want to know, what are people talking about? How is that call going? And how can I make sure that I can help leverage the conversation that my sales team had to provide a more personalized and relevant marketing? And the email contact details parser, that's kind of wordy. We don't have a very snappy name for that, but we have a great GIF later in this presentation, which shows that, similar to that sales call transcription, as you're having conversations with your leads, prospects, and customers, there's a lot of really important data that's being exchanged in those messages that you want to be able to extract out in a format that you can then use to power segmentation or personalization or reporting. So large body of work around data hygiene. We also have several projects related to helping personalize content, and three of the biggest ones are within our SEO tool. We are helping to try to recommend topics that you can write about that are relevant to your content. So we do that by crawling your website and blog and trying to identify, hey, this blog looks like it has 3 topics. And so here's a couple tangentially related topics that could help your content strategy grow. We also have a product called Adaptive Page Testing, which is part of our Marketing Enterprise Suite. And that allows, again, I have demos for all of these later, but Adaptive Page Testing helps you to launch multiple versions of one piece of content and try to identify quickly as possible what the most effective piece of content is to help capture. And the last piece that kind of goes under the radar sometimes is, as part of the HubSpot free CRM, we offer HubSpot Insights Enrichment, which gives you additional data points per domain that you can then use to power personalization and segmentation. So we will tell you the industry of your leads so that you can create specialized content or landing pages or offers for them. And we'll get into all of these in more detail later. The third pillar here that can't be understated is that HubSpot has a very large and growing ecosystem of integrations that also leverage AI technology. So, as quickly as me and my team are building many of these kinds of functionality into the HubSpot platform, we also can't overstate the value of the very robust ecosystem of apps that you can add to the HubSpot platform if you have sort of more specialized or needs for a number of things there. So we're going to go through a quick look of some of the features that we have today. And this first one is one of our older ones, but it's a super valuable one. And it's just this basic idea of adding a domain. And there's a couple examples here. We have Boston Calling, which is a music festival in Boston. Remember when you could go to things like music festivals? And we have HubSpot. And critically, what we're adding here is the actual name and the location. And there's a few other pieces of data that you can't see in here, such as industry, size, location, and web technologies. A question we often get is sort of like, why did we pick these data points to focus on? We survey our users every year or so to try to figure out what are the most important pieces of data to enable you as a marketer to do some of these other tasks like segmentation or reporting. And this is the information that we found. And this is key because by supplying this data from a central database, it means that you don't have the risk of user error as you're entering this data. No one's going to be misspelling things because you can trust that the data is going to be clean moving forward. A few other things here on a very similar idea. This is the email signature parser that I mentioned before. And the way that this works is when your sales reps are emailing back and forth with their prospects, we're actually scanning that email for what we identify as job title, phone number, company, all of those things. So your CRM goes from sort of like this empty table into all of a sudden you have the ability to segment by job title, which means that you can get seniority and you can recognize that, oh, we don't have, a C-level or director on this deal. We need to make sure to follow up with that. And we can also parse out phone number, zip code, so that you can do appropriate routing and assignment, or if you want to be doing regional campaigns. All of these data points, it's a very subtle thing to extract these from the email, but it enables marketers to actually then leverage that data to do segmentation and reporting, as I've mentioned. Moving forward, the next two are going to be focused on getting data from one place into another in the right format. So this is our business card scanner, which is part of the free CRM app. So even if you're not a HubSpot user, you can use the HubSpot mobile app, and the business card scanner is included in that. And it, similar to the email parser, it identifies job title, name, et cetera, so that you can use that data to, again, power sort of those outcomes-based goals like segmentation or routing.
And Kevin, is that technology people would be familiar with, like when you scan checks? I mean, is it using a similar form of AI, like computer vision?
Yep. So under the hood, the way that this works on iOS and Android is the phones have what's called OCR, which I believe is optical character recognition. I may have gotten that wrong.
No, right.
And so that scans the text. And then companies like HubSpot, or if you have like a Concur or some other sort of expense software, we have a separate machine learning process that says, okay, I've recognized this piece of text as Joe Burke, and Joe Burke is probably a name, and inbound growth specialist is probably a job title. Right. So that's a good example of how we're taking the tools that are put out by Apple and Google to read the text, but then we're applying specialized context to say, for sales reps scanning this piece of text, we need to be able to recognize which fields on the card are which. Similar to Concur, I believe we have Concur as our internal expense tool, and you take a picture of the receipt, they're recognizing which lines on that are the total, what the date is, what the location was, et cetera. So again, another subtle one here, but when you import a CSV into HubSpot, we are trying to identify the column headers there to make sure that that's going to get to the correct HubSpot property. And again, that seems like something small, but we've actually noticed, I think more than 25% increase of data getting successfully into the CSV, which we know is a huge pain. A lot of people are sort of still stitching systems together through CSVs. And sometimes you export a CSV from one place and it has 30 or 40 or 50 columns. And you're supposed to try to figure out which of those columns need to belong to which of, any number of HubSpot properties. And it's those kinds of things where it's a straightforward task, but it's critically important that you're getting all of that data consolidated correctly so that you can then use it to do personalization or routing. The last one under the data hygiene umbrella is CRM deduplication, which again, it seems like a small task of making sure that, your two Mark LaRosas exist as one record and not two. But we've seen some pretty dire mistakes from this in the past. There's actually a HubSpot customer had duplicate companies and they sell very expensive medical equipment, and they had the wrong address on one of those companies. And so they shipped a piece of equipment that was worth tens of thousands of dollars to the wrong address because of duplicates. And these kinds of database issues, which seem sort of like mundane and perhaps you can sort of like sweep them under the rug, they do really rear their heads in pretty gnarly places. And so the deduplication tool we launched last year at Inbound, it's been a huge success. Customers use it over and over again, which is kind of our proxy for value in terms of when we launch something, we want to make sure that people are using it and they're coming back to use it so that we can get a sense that that actually is providing the value.
And Kevin, you and I had talked about this earlier before we got on, but to me, this product is such a great literal example for people who are still trying to comprehend what is machine learning and how does it work.
Mhm.
So I have a Tesla that has autopilot, and Tesla released a feature about a year and a half ago where it could change lanes, but you had to say yes. So it would prompt you and say, would you like to change lanes right now? And as the driver, you would say, yes, yeah, go ahead and change lanes. And it would change lanes on its own. After about 3 months of learning and humans saying yes, 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 it got to the point where the confidence level was of a human driver, that they were confident that it could change lanes as well as a human driver or better. And you then had an option as a Tesla owner to let the car now change lanes on its own with no human intervention. So this to me is actually the same thing, but in a much more practical use case where you guys have the potential over time to allow machine learning to reach a confidence level where in theory, a marketer could say, listen, the last 100 of these you've recommended were right. Like just change them on your own. Is there a day where we might see this product actually be able to truly intelligently automate the deduping process through machine learning?
Yes, there definitely is a day when we might see that. In full transparency, we don't have a date for that day today,
Yeah.
but there's a future there. The reason we haven't headed in that direction is it's a risky thing to merge records. You know, if you merge two records and they shouldn't be correctly merged, that could trigger automation downstream. And so it's been a bit of a conservative product design decision for us to leave this in the manual state, but we continue to debate, you know, should this be the self-healing CRM of the future, and I think it will get there eventually. Your description of Tesla recommending to you like, hey, I think I should change lanes now, but I want you to tell me if I'm right or wrong is exactly the same way that the deduplication tool worked. This is really a list of recommendations where we think these are duplicates and we're pretty sure. And in fact, under the hood, this list is actually ranked by which we're most confident in. So that's the reason they're not alphabetical or ranked by create date or something. If you go into your HubSpot portal, the ones at the top are going to be the ones that are most likely to be duplicates. And as you keep going through the pages, they're going to get shakier and shakier. And every time you say like, yes, these are duplicates, we're recording that. And then we are continuing to improve the model that we use to make these recommendations. And if anybody was a early adopter of the deduplication tool, you will have noticed that about, I think it was 2 months after we launched this initially, we finally released it to a bunch of customers. When we finally had tons of feedback coming in, we were able to update the model behind the scenes and the recommendations for were much better. And we actually heard that directly from customers. And so it can seem sort of like a squishy thing to get customer feedback about the quality of duplicate recommendations, but we definitely heard that.
Yeah, and I think again, it's such a great example because if you're new to machine learning, if it's just like a foreign concept to you, humans train the machines. Like in almost every case where we're seeing this applied, not only just with HubSpot within the industry, humans need to be in the loop. The input goes in, but many times the human is saying, yes, this is a good recommendation. Like if you think about even Google Analytics and you go in and it'll give you insights, it says, was this helpful? Yes, no. Or if you're in Spotify, like, do you like this song? You like it. You're teaching the machine to show you more things like that or to do more things like that. And that's how machine learning works. It needs to be trained on data and oftentimes on human inputs.
Yeah, that's 100% sort of like the dirty secret of the AI industry is that behind the scenes, it's still people. It's just automating those little decisions that people are making. And that's why I like that definition of AI is just trying to mimic the human decision-making process. Because when you try to evaluate R2 context duplicates, there's a set number of things that you're looking at. You're looking at their name, their location, perhaps their email address, and you can intuitively know like, okay, Mark LaRosa, that's identical, but even if it was like Matt and Matthew, you also know that there's a relationship between sort of nicknames or shortened names or misspellings. And that's what the deduplication tool captures is all of that kind of like fuzzy matching that a person can do that is really difficult to define through strict rules. You're always going to keep adding to a longer and longer rules list if you were to try to create a rules-based deduplication tool. The other kind of gotcha is that for very large databases, the rules-based systems become too slow to use. So for even millions of records here, the machine learning approach allows us to deduplicate those databases, which has been huge for us.
We just had a quick question come in from an obvious HubSpot customer already. So
Sure.
is there a way inside of HubSpot to batch manage duplicates? Right now, it's still quite a manual process as you go record by record.
Yep, it is. We hear that pain consistently. It's something we've debated, but there are no plans to add that. We do have a few partners that have some of these like extended capabilities, such as batch merge or an automated merge too, that we have heard high remarks from, but the native tool for now won't have a batch merge functionality.
All right, one more quick one, just
Sure.
because people have questions related to this one. How does it work with parent-child account structures? So some companies have numerous local locations versus a headquarters. Does the machine learning figure out which should be the right address, or do you have to use a custom field with the headquarters checkbox or something related?
Yep. Today, we actually limit you from merging the parent-child account. If a company has a parent-child relationship, we will prevent that from being merged in the duplicate tool because of that. That is something that we're also working towards, but isn't part of the current scope. So this is in beta right now. We actually have call transcripts in the Sales Enterprise product today, but we've newly begun a large project to make those transcripts much more valuable for the entire organization, for marketers, for customer service reps. So like I mentioned, a lot of the important content for a marketer is actually happening in the conversations that your sales team is having. And I don't know if you folks know many sales reps, but getting them to take detailed, very accurate, very actionable notes is a huge drag on them. Nobody likes doing it. So wouldn't it be wonderful if we could automate the entire note-taking process, basically? And step one of that is just getting the call transcripts in one place, making sure that those transcripts are accurate, and having the ability to do things like search on a transcript and then leave comments on it to say like, hey, I noticed that you mentioned a competitor here. So, that's why we've got Ian here leaving a comment at mentioning somebody. So this is in a private beta right now. If anybody's interested and is a sales enterprise customer and getting their hands on this, shoot me a note and we'll definitely hook you up.
Now, is that using any content extraction yet, like AI functions where it's pulling out entities or things like that?
Not yet, but you definitely have sort of predicted the roadmap here, similar to doing contact detail identification in emails. It's the exact same play that we would like to run on call transcripts and also on chat. We have a small feature today in the HubSpot chat product to try to identify first names, which goes a long way because nothing sounds more beautiful to somebody than the sound of their own name. And so we've tried to make the chat name identification piece very good. We have a similar theme of projects related to call transcripts, and that's going to start with just identifying names and then identifying, follow-up dates, next steps. And key topics is sort of the trickier one on that, but a lot of that work will be supporting the call experience here.
And again, if you think about AI as like language, vision, prediction, we like to think of these three buckets. In that language one, you do have things like applications called content extraction, where the AI learns to identify specific entities that it can then extract out, or it can even eventually learn to identify what are the most important phrases or sections of a script and extract that kind of stuff out. So this is like a lot of energy in the AI space and in marketing is going into ways to take language and extract more out of it and also create language.
Switching gears, so that's the bulk of the use cases that we have that focus on data hygiene. This is a screenshot of the test results page from adaptive page testing, which I mentioned earlier. And again, you can think of this as sort of automated A/B testing, where normally in an A/B test, you launch multiple versions of a piece of content, you let that run for 1, 2, or 3 months, and then you make a decision about which of those 2 pieces of content is better. With adaptive page testing, which under the hood uses a subfield of machine learning called reinforcement learning, we try to optimize that decision rather than waiting some number of months. As soon as we can, we start shifting traffic to whichever page variant is performing the best. And in HubSpot today, form submission on a landing page to identify which is the best performing, assuming that you're trying to capture leads. And you can see that over time, this C variant eventually is proven to be the best. The A variant sort of runs out pretty quickly. Later in this test, the E variant seems to still be performing relatively well. So it's given a chance to make sure that we're not missing anything by doing that. Another nice touch for this feature is that you can run 5 variants of a page rather than just the one. And this is part of the marketing enterprise tool. So I've mentioned this a couple of times, but this is really one of our key theses over the past kind of like 18 months. We focus so much on these seemingly mundane tasks of ensuring data quality and cleaning this up, because it's what powers your ability to have reporting that you can trust, to have automation that you can trust for assignment or alerts and segmentation and scoring. And I think if I look back on the marketing tech industry sort of 5 years ago, everybody was trying to solve these problems with artificial intelligence outright, but many companies, including HubSpot, realized quickly that a lot of the data that we were relying on to enable these sort of more obvious or closer to the marketer role depended on the data. And so we've shifted gears a bit over the past 12 months or so to focus on ensuring that the data quality is good. Sorry.
That's what happens when bad data, the
Right.
sirens show up.
Bad data police are coming. You need to ensure that the data quality is good so that you can do some of these higher value tasks closer to your marketing. And I believe some of this is just a high level look at by the numbers from behind the scenes. These tools have proven to be very effective for our customers. And so we're updating millions and millions of properties a week with the HubSpot enrichment tools. We track when people overwrite that data too, to give us a sense of, does this seem to be in general accurate? And we have an extremely low dispute rate of the data that's in there. It's not perfect. I saw that we had some folks calling in from Europe. We do know that there definitely are some issues with the European companies. It's something that we're continuing to work on. But in general, that enrichment data is by and large reliable and is more accurate than depending on your sales team or your marketing team to enter that. For duplicates, like I said, we see repeat activity from portals over and over. So that's a great sign that that tool is delivering on the promise. So like correctly identifying and making it easy to identify those things. For the email parser, we're pulling out tons in, these numbers are actually a little bit old. I think we're well over 500,000 property. And for the last section there of call transcripts, we're transcribing an enormous amount of data that's enabling marketers and sales reps to actually action that data in a way that they hadn't been able to in the past.
HubSpot obviously has access to massive amounts of data. And one of the questions we get all the time is, well, I'm a small business. Can I use AI? The point of some of this is, yeah, because they have the data that can learn. You as a small business may be able to find all these individual use cases. It's been trained already on a larger data set to enable you to immediately start using something. So, again, like maybe the contact dedupe. I don't know if there's a minimum for you guys, but if it's 10,000 or more contacts in a database, I would imagine there's probably a reasonable assumption that 1% of those might be duplicates or some fractional number that you could use that tool without having to, worry, where's all my data going to come from? So yeah, just to remind people, small businesses can use AI because tools are built on data sets to enable you to immediately start seeing value from something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anybody can upload data into a HubSpot portal and we'll immediately identify which of those are duplicates. What Paul's describing is the cold start problem, the idea that you need some critical mass of data before you can get any of the value. But we have global system knowledge. We anonymize data from many HubSpot customers together so that small businesses can show up and use HubSpot's tools and get the benefit, sort of the wisdom of the crowd there.
So I did see a couple come in. Here was one on, can you compare and contrast mapping CSV columns or email signature interpretation using machine learning versus a rule-based system? So I think, like, what are the advantages? What's the difference in the process maybe between the two? Is it traditionally human-powered versus, machine learning-powered?
Yeah, that's a great question. And going back to one of Paul's kind of intro questions of like, how do we actually approach? Almost everything gets launched first with a rules-based system. And then we replace that rules-based system as a benchmark with a machine learning model. So for example, for the contact deduplication product, we try to build out the end-to-end experience with people and an actual functioning product to make sure it works. And we launch it with no machine learning. The rules that we were using there is what's called edit distance, which means like if one character in the name was wrong, so my name is Kevin, if that was spelled, Kev M or something, if there was a misspelling of the M instead of the N, the rules-based system would catch that, but it's good enough that it's delivering some value. People can get in there and they can start marking yes or no, these duplicates are correct. And that's why that human feedback piece is so critical. So we launched the dedupe tool with an edit distance rule. We had a usage and activity and manual sort of rating of the recommendations that we were making. And we used then those ratings from people interacting with the recommendations that we were making in the product to learn a machine learning model. And we can then compare the baseline performance of the rules-based system to the machine learning model. And in our case, the machine learning model was much more accurate. So that's a great question. And in fact, there's a rule book by Martin Zinklevich, who's one of the most senior engineers at Google. And he published like the rules of AI. And one of the first rules in that long rule book, and this is I can try to find the link and maybe we can share that out afterwards. But if you search like Google rules of machine learning, you'll find this white paper that they've turned into a video series. And like rule number like 2 or 3 is don't be afraid to launch your product with machine learning. And you will see that time and time again, that like the first step to doing machine learning is like, don't do machine learning. Try to just validate that the product that you're trying to build is valuable. And that's something we've learned definitely the hard way at HubSpot about making sure that we're just sticking to the fundamentals of talking to customers, understanding their problems, and trying to scope out a solution that will help them solve that problem, and sort of de-emphasizing the need for machine learning. Along the way, we've gotten better at recognizing where machine learning is appropriate, but that's a great place to start.
So are there any plans to build machine learning into content optimization, i.e. automated subject lines, automated personalized content based on engagement? So again, conceptually, if you think about one of those questions, really the recommendation engine. So if you're on Netflix and you're watching things, or if you use TED Talks even, they're learning what you watch or read to be able to recommend related things to you. So not only that recommendation engine, but the ability to actually let it create things.
I'll be totally transparent here. We actually had a version of content recommendations that we sunset this past summer. It was a module for the HubSpot CMS blog, which you could add to the sidebar, which would recommend additional posts from your blog based on the current piece of content that the visitor was looking at, and if available, that visitor's history with your content. We chose to sunset it, not because the machine learning piece didn't work, but because the product execution didn't work. So basically, it was challenging for people to understand if that was working or how it was working. And so we rolled it back. We are intending to do a more complete, valuable solution there. We don't have a specific timeline on that, but you can definitely expect something like that at some point in the future, because it is a great fit for machine learning. We've just learned so much about how to do the product side of things really well and the design things, and make it sort of that people expect HubSpot software to be powerful and easy to use. And that was a piece of software that was powerful, but not easy to use. And so we're going back to the drawing board a little bit. In the meantime, adaptive page testing is definitely content optimization. It's just not per visitor. It's optimizing the piece of content for all visitors. Within Nicole's question, there was a bit about subject line optimization. We don't have any immediate plans to do something like that. We have done a lot of research around doing things like, if a user writes one subject line, can we then write 3 additional subject lines that look sort of like that and may actually help with engagement? It's really hard. To Paul's questions at the beginning of the webinar here about the interest in natural language processing. Right now, computers are very good at reading, and they're not so great at writing or talking, but they're getting there. And we're sort of seeing this like evolution of types of applied machine learning progress pretty quickly here. I think folks will probably remember that it was, I don't know, maybe 2009 or so, when all of a sudden like every picture on Facebook was automatically tagged. There was this breakthrough moment in machine learning research, applied machine learning products too, where all of a sudden computers could see very, very well. It's still tricky for computers to gen images, but there is some more like researchy papers on that you'll see that like, imagine a computer trying to paint a picture based on some other picture. We're going through a similar sort of like evolution on the text side of things, where computers right now are great at reading and they can kind of talk, but they're not quite there, but they will get there soon.
I mean, think about Surrey and how much money they've been pouring into that, and Surrey's still not that great. And you do hear about advancements like GPT-3 might be something people have heard about, and the ability for the machine to create some language. And we've seen some applications like Market Muse is doing some really interesting things and being able to create first drafts of things. And I know you guys analyze sales emails and can like recommend ways to make the email a little better. So it's a really fast emerging space. The one thing I would add here too is I think Uberflip is one of the integration partners that you guys have in your ecosystem. They do content recommendation. Path Factory is another one that plays in that space. I don't think they have a native integration with HubSpot, but they're a content recommendation engine. And then generating subject lines would be like a Phrasee, Phrasee, is an AI-powered company out of London that does email subject lines. So there are tools out there. And that's the thing. I think one of the takeaways here is HubSpot has this robust, growing ecosystem, and they've really made a move to be a true platform company where you can plug this stuff in. And so sometimes you're going to need to go find a tool that does the exact thing you're looking for while taking advantage of the native features within HubSpot.
Absolutely.
Okay. Does this work the same way with the Hub plugin with WordPress?
If the question is about the migration tool that I mentioned, that a behind the scenes sort of internal tool, that we have folks that help with that migration process as part of some of our higher tier marketing products. And so it's helping to make those folks more efficient, which enables faster turnaround times for a customer to raise their hand and say, I want to migrate my whole website. We've been able to shorten the process so that people can get their website up and running on HubSpot faster, and we can get feedback faster. So that's overall a much better customer experience. If the question was related to that particular process, yes, that definitely works. The content AI tools that we have today, the biggest one is adaptive page testing, and that only works right now with the HubSpot CMS.
We have a data enrichment question through Insights, through HubSpot Insights. Does it only work if you're using the HubSpot CRM? Is there anything existing, such as like Dynamics, that can be connected to HubSpot, or is it native only to HubSpot?
So it is native only to HubSpot, but if you're using the HubSpot Marketing Hub, you are also using the HubSpot CRM. That's sort of the magic that we have, is that HubSpot's platform isn't a bunch of things that are integrated together. It is truly under the hood a single database that powers these more pointed use cases around marketing, sales, and services. So we don't have a native Dynamics integration, but there are some partners that will help sync information from HubSpot to Dynamics. We do have a very robust Salesforce integration. And so if you are adding domains into the HubSpot company object, we're going to enrich those with those data points I mentioned, industry, size, location, et cetera. Once that data is there, you are free to sync it. It's available by API. So it is possible to move it over to Dynamics or whichever other CRM you may be using.
Any products that integrate with HubSpot that bring AI and ML to the table? So we touched on that one. Again, I think you guys have about 200 to 250 like certified partners in the ecosystem, meaning they have built-in integrations. You have to know what you're looking for. It's actually something we've been working on behind the scenes, is to identify all the partners in the HubSpot ecosystem that have AI. And I know you had a couple of them on that one slide, Kevin. The thing I would tell you is the best way to look at this is to find the areas where you spend a lot of time and energy on repetitive data-driven processes, and then go find a specific tool for that. So if you just go broadly into the HubSpot ecosystem and say, let me just go find like 10 AI tools and mash them into HubSpot, it's not going to have a great result for you. But if you're a content marketer and you spend all your time figuring out what to write about, writing about the content, and then figuring out how to recommend it to people, then I would hone in on the content area of the ecosystem and start reach out to HubSpot, reach out to us. What we always tell people is, you're still going to buy marketing technology. You need to buy smarter technology. So find the tech partners who are building AI to make the product better so that you're more efficient and successful at your job. That's at the end of the day what you're trying to do. So it is a good place to look, is the existing ecosystem, and they have one of those, logoscapes that you can scan through, but HubSpot can help there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said that better myself. Focus on the use case that you're trying to do, just like we are focusing on helping companies grow better. We're going to use AI along the way. That's, I think, the best mentality that marketers should adopt. If Nicole's question was more about how do I do additional AI on top of HubSpot, if you do have a data science team, the approach there would be that we have very broad APIs so that you can pull HubSpot data out into some other developer environment. If you have data scientists who are going to be using their own toolkits to build their own machine learning models, they would be using the HubSpot public APIs.
One more specific for PandaDoc. Jim had asked, just connected PandaDoc, electronic signing app. It would be great if the HubSpot app recognized this and made sure the fields in each system had entries and were correct. Is there any thoughts on this? Is this a use case you guys have looked at? Anything with that integration?
Yep, we don't have specific plans for the PandaDoc integration. I think more broadly, you will see us improve. HubSpot acquired a company called PieSync last year, and PieSync is designed to bring lots of data in from many places. And there is definitely a category of projects that we will take on at some point that are very similar to the CRM the CSV import. It's a similar kind of mapping problem where fields or data in one place have similar but probably slightly different names than they do in HubSpot. And so just helping with the fundamental plumbing of making sure that you're syncing the right things from A to B. So no immediate plans for PandaDoc, but that is a great fit application for where we can improve the data hygiene.
All right, I'm going to ask one last question. So you spent a lot of time on these really tangible use cases, these like fundamental short-term value exchange, like you create it, you know people can use it. If you were to step out, and I'm not saying tell us about HubSpot's roadmap or the things you're dreaming of, but like when you look at the industry and you know how repetitive so many of the tasks are we do, and you know what AI is truly capable of, and maybe not where it sits today, but like what it's possible, like what are the one or two big ideas for the application of AI that get you excited about we might be able to truly take a leap forward as an industry if AI realizes its potential in this area? Is there anything that comes to mind there for you?
Yeah, the two major threads there is this idea of capturing all of the conversations that your sales, not so much your marketing team, I guess with conversational marketing, but mostly with sales and customer service. Your sales reps and your customer service reps are engaging with your customers and your prospects across a number of channels, and that's chat, email, phone, SMS, social. So being able to ingest all of that data and then organize it really cleanly to power the use cases that marketers want to provide a really contextual customer experience. On top of that, once you've been able to sort of organize and capture all of that data, we want to be able to show people how they're using it. So that was that idea of that outcomes-based framework that I outlined earlier. So we can show you that, you have hundreds of reports. However, most of the data in those reports is actually coming from your integrations, or it's coming from manual import, and helping give people a much better sense of where is the data in my business coming from, and how is it being used, and where are the problems. That's something that we think is very achievable, is super valuable, and is exciting. It's going to take a lot of really small projects tied together to achieve that sort of full sense of data visibility and empowerment for folks. But that's something we're pretty excited about.
Do you think it's feasible that in the next 3 to 5 years, we as marketers, as service people, as salespeople, we see something like that?
I think if you don't, they will probably fire me.
All right, that is not the note I want to end. I'm just kidding. No, this has been awesome. I mean, like I said at the beginning, I love sitting down and talking AI with you, whether it's at a Mediterranean restaurant or over a formal webinar. So really appreciate everybody joining us today. We have more than 400 people registered for this one. So, I think there's a lot of interest in the topic, and obviously a lot of really passionate customers of HubSpot, as we've been for a really long time. So Kevin, thank you for being a part of this. As always, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. And yeah, we'll have to do this again soon, man.
Yeah, anytime, Paul. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.